Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm Councillor Lindstad, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. A few housekeeping bits of information for you. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk today should remember to sign out when leaving the building after today's meeting, otherwise we'll be looking for you for hours. A reminder that the meeting is being live streamed, and there's a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and the recording will be on the Council's website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of anyone making deputations, but there will be some footage of them as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room while the meeting is in progress. Also, I'm proposing to have all the deputations around the table, so if you don't want to be seen, because you will be seen if you sit on that side. I think that's right, isn't it, Joe? So if you don't want to be seen on camera, wait and you can come up a little bit later when everybody else has finished. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those, stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. So please remember that. And please, can everyone remember to use the microphones provided when they're speaking? It's a button on the right. Okay. So, first of all, should we introduce ourselves? I've introduced myself, and on my left is...
I'm Councillor Simon Bowshire. I'm the Conservative spokesman for Traffic and Transportation.
I am Councillor Yahya Chaudhry and Deputy Deputy Leader for the Labour Group and Deputy Chair for the Travel and Transport.
Wayne Layton, Finance Manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Denise Bastow, Parking Office Manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Kevin McKee, Parking Manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Tallulah Gordon-Hall, Transport Planning at Portsmouth City Council.
Nikki Musson, Transport Planning Team, Portsmouth City Council.
Pam Turton, Assistant Director Transport, Portsmouth City Council.
Joanne Moore-Smith, Democratic Services.
Michael Lawler, City Solicitor.
Thank you, everybody. Right, first of all, are there any apologies? No? Okay. Declarations of interest? Councillor Bowshire, Councillor Chowdhury? Right. I'm going to invite people up to sit before you start, Pam, is that right? Yes. Right, so let me see, I've got a list of, I have somewhere, a list of people. Councillor Hugh Mason, is Hugh here? Ah, yes. Melvin Hiscock, Mr. Bartle, Mr. McCreesh, would you like to come up to the table? Mr. Paul Smith, Matt Smart. I don't know if Debbie Bailey is here. Is Debbie Bailey here? Okay. Barbara Jones. No? Oh, yes. Mr. James Messiah. Councillor Steve Pitt. I've got two late requests for deputations. Pardon? Oh, is it? Have I missed him? No, I'm sorry. Is he on my list? No, he's not. Okay. I apologise. I must have got the wrong list here. I've got two lists. So, Councillor Stubbs, sorry. I do apologise. I was not discriminating against you. Yes, it's a different one from mine. Sorry, I've got an older one, obviously. There are two late additions, which if we have time, I'll invite them up to the table. But Pam Turton, who is the Deputy Director or Assistant Director for Transport, will give an outline of what this is all about.
Thank you, Councillor. We're considering two reports today. The report relating to MB, which is agenda item 3, and the report considering responses to MC, which is agenda item 4. As the deputations are being taken together, I'll outline both of these and give a very quick introduction as to where we are. So the two reports consider the public responses to the traffic regulation order, which was advertised between the 30th of August and the 20th of September of this year. This followed the decision that was taken in July 2018, where the residents' parking programme of consultation was agreed, and it was determined that those areas in which there has been 2 surveys, at least over the past 5 years, will not be subject to a further informal survey. Both MB and MC fall into this category. In relation to MB, a formal consultation on the creation of a parking zone was undertaken to operate a restriction of MB permit holders only between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. daily. Overall, we received 256 representations during the consultation from a total of 1,760 letters which were distributed, a response rate of around 14%. And the results were 153 in support, 95 in objection, and 8 representations where it was unclear whether they were in support or in objection to the order. 22 of the 95 objections were received from residents in 2 cul-de-sacs within the zone, Chestnut Avenue and Fernhurst Road. Because of this, it is recommended that the MB parking zone proposed under TRO 84/2018 is implemented as advertised, with the exceptions of the cul-de-sacs Chestnut Avenue and Fernhurst Road. Looking to the second report for MC, similarly, a formal consultation on the creation of a parking zone was undertaken to operate the restriction of MC permit holders only between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. daily. Overall, 473 representations were received during the consultation from a total of 2,670 letters being distributed, which is around a 16.5% response rate. The results were 234 in support, 225 in objection, though 35 of those were outside of the MC zone, and 14 representations where it was unclear either way. 1 representation had been omitted from the report, and a copy of the response has been circulated to the councillors. It is therefore recommended that MB zone Bramble Road area, proposed under TRO 87 to 2018, is implemented as advertised.
Thank you, Pam. We now have deputations. I'm going to start with Councillor Hugh Mason because he has a surgery, 5 o'clock? Or? No, 4:15. Oh, 4:15. Right. Okay, so you go. Yes, okay. And then I'll take everybody as an order. We're limiting you to 4 minutes each because obviously there are a lot of people making deputations. Councillor Mason.
Thank you. Councillor Stagg, members. I'm making this deputation both on my own behalf and at the request of a number of residents of the area between Albert Road and Campbell Road. Firstly, context, my own story. 7:50 p.m. on the 14th of October. I drove home looking for a parking place for a family-sized car. I drove down Victoria Road, Chelsea Road, Albert Grove, Inglis Road, Oxford Road, Goodwood Road, Bolton Road, Exmouth Road, St Vincent Road, Duncan Road, Collingwood Road, Napier Road, Taswell Road, before finding a parking space, one of the 2 vacant parking spaces in the Wimbledon Park Sports Centre. OK, perhaps I should get a Fiat 500, but it's clear to me that the MD zone, the area either side of Albert Road, is at absolute capacity. Second, local residents in that area remember that when the MB and MBC zones were residence parking zones in 2014, there was a considerable displacement of company vehicles and second cars into the MD zone, that is the area either side of Albert Road. And this was especially severe north of Albert Road, and this should not be allowed to happen again. Thirdly, when the MD zone was surveyed in February 2014 by the Council, there was a considerable demand for a residence parking zone on both sides of Albert Road. And in the northern area, the King's Theatre car park and the MC displacement area, there was a very strong support for the introduction of a zone. Fourthly, a number of residents have approached me asking either that the MB-MC zone be not implemented at all, or that if it is, that the MD zone become a residence parking zone. And again, this is especially from people in Campbell Road, where they believe that the north side residents will be able to park on the south side, but the south side residents would not be able to park on the north side, which is a total and utter nonsense. Fifthly, I therefore request that today, and I mean today, that you announce that there will be a survey of the MD area and that this will be undertaken before the MB and MC zones are actually implemented. Lastly, my apologies for leaving. I need to get to my advice centre, where I'll undoubtedly have my ear bent by more than one person on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason, and good luck with your advice centre. Next, Melvin Hiscock. No? Okay. Mr. Bartle, would you like to go next?
My name's John Bartle. I live with my wife at 113 Stansted Road and have done so for 51 years. I also own numbers 90, 92, 115 and 117 Stansted Road. These properties generate just 3 cars, whilst having a combined frontage to Stansted Road of some 40 metres, which should allow up to at least 8 cars. Despite this, we are often unable to park anywhere near our house. Indeed, we often walk or take a taxi when going out in the knowledge that should we take our own car, we will be unlikely to park it on our return. We are constantly faced with people from outside the immediate area, mainly but not only students, parking in our part of Stansted Road. Last year, one such person returned to her home in Africa for 3 months during the summer, leaving 3 Jaguars parked in the immediate area. In July this year, a BMW was driven to Stansted Road against the one-way system and left there for 12 weeks. Currently, there is a car outside our house which was parked there 2.5 months ago, during which time it has been clamped for having no vehicle licence. In addition to all this, we have to put up with large commercial vans and lorries, as well as motorhomes being parked by outsiders. We recently had 5 of these overnight in our short stretch of Stansted Road. In this context, we are aware of an area to the north of us where a householder has parked several such vehicles, as well as trailers, caravans and other non-domestic vehicles which never move. During the short life of the previous parking zone, we and our neighbours were able to park within a reasonable distance of our homes. I strongly urge you to reinstate that system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bartle. Mr. McCreish.
The arguments are well worn over the years. I just want to emphasise a couple of things. One, the creeping piecemeal zone is the zone allowing zones is one of the problem. And when we had the LB zone suggestion about 2 years ago, where the mainly student roads were going to be taken out of that zone, and that got defeated. It was a proposal, presumably by the officers, but it got turned down. I think that you've got some of those roads, like Margate Road, which have a huge number of student student houses. And where do those people go? Because they either can't pay because they're not registered, or they choose not to pay, so they come into our roads. I live in Havelock Road. And so that's a problem. With the increasing number of student accommodation in the centre, where they won't have parking, they also will be parking in the nearest roads, which are Havelock Road, Outram Road, Livingston Road, to those student houses here. I I certainly support Councillor Mason's plea for the MD zone because that just seems an anomaly. So I make two suggestions. One, that the previous proposal to take the student roads out of LB zone be looked at again. And secondly, I support Councillor Mason. And third, that going further eastward and south would be a good idea.
Thank you. Mr. Portsmouth.
Portsmouth, yep. Firstly, is Lib Dem Councillor Jackson here? No. Well, the last meeting we had about this, he stood up, being the Lib Dem, it was Conservatives in power, and he turned around and said that the council, Conservatives, have made a right fiasco of this, a complete mess of this. Now, is this lot going to turn it round? Are they going to go along with what your Lib Dem Jackson said? This is a complete and utter mess. We've had interviews on the newspaper, on the television, and we actually have Barry Kay from the Northcott admitting it's a pub that he runs, admitting he relies on people driving there, so he's promoting drink driving, so they can park there. And then if they park there from 7 o'clock in the evening on a Saturday night. They go out and they don't come back till the Sunday night at 5 o'clock to move their cars. So consequently, you can't move when you live there on a Sunday to go out. You know, what can the Lib Dem Council now do about this? The wording on the questionnaire, it had to be in by a certain date, which was actually a Thursday. So as the offices move, it didn't go into the offices until the Monday. But it's already been decided, which we already had it sent round, it's already been decided that on the Tuesday we get the bit of paper put through the door that now you'll have to pay more and the dates will be different. Is this, you know, is this the way to run it? No? Right.
Let's continue with your deputation and we'll answer the questions at the end, okay?
Okay. But this is the thing. People are allowed to leave their cars there at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night. I drove a taxi and I had to run people back there. They left their cars there on the Saturday night from 7 o'clock, 1900 hours, right the way through to 1700 hours on a Sunday. So that is taken all the parking spaces for the whole weekend away from anybody that lives there. There's quite a few pubs in the area and up and down the Albert Road. Do they all rely on the cars driving there, parking up from 7 o'clock till 5 o'clock, and then or advocating drink driving, that they take their cars home after they come out the pub? Thank you.
Have you finished, Mr. Smith?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, thank you. Matt Smart.
Hi. Many people question how parking zones actually improve parking, and students are often cited as a major problem. There's no denying it, the difference in parking between term time and holidays is massive. Now, most students don't have cars, but with around 30,000 uni students, the ones that do contribute to major parking problems. The uni guidelines are that students don't bring their cars to the city, but this is routinely ignored. And some people will say that zones just get students to park somewhere else. But time and time again, as shown in reports produced by the council, the introduction of zones was the encouragement that many students needed to leave their cars in their hometowns. Students repeatedly told the council that as a result of the introduction to the zone, they would not bring their cars back to Portsmouth. And the introduction and subsequent removal of the MC zone proved this. The council's own surveys by Traffic Watch UK showed that the previous MC zone resulted in 1,000 or more students taking their cars out of the city and leaving them there. And when the zone went, they brought them back. And since anyone can park in the MB and MC zones after 7 p.m, there's 1,000 or more parking spaces for anyone that needs them, wherever you may live. At the time when parking is at its most premium, into the evening and overnight, there's 1,000 extra spaces. The MC zone has been surveyed and consulted time and time again, and every single time the results have been in favour of a parking zone. The previous introduction of the MB zone resulted in an increase in demand for an MC zone, and per the council's survey, demand increased to 80% in favour of an MC zone. If MB is reintroduced in isolation, then the demand for MC will increase again. And when the MC zone was introduced previously, many people reported to the council that it made a real difference to their lives. And there were those that initially opposed the MC zone that felt the real benefit when it was introduced and wanted it to stay. So I call on the council to reintroduce the MC zone and make the lives of residents better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Barbara Jones.
Good afternoon. Non-car owners form a minority group that this council seems comfortable to ignore. Everybody talking here has cars and problems. So I'm talking about parking permits. An EU directive, section 149, number B, which amends the 2010 Equality Act, of interest to you, Mr. Lawther, was enacted in April 2011 and must be applied to all new policies and amendments to previous policies introduced by all public authorities and in all member states. This directive inserts the following crucial wording, and I quote, "Special attention to the protected characteristics should not, by its very protection, cause differentiation, adverse impact or discrimination between those protected characteristics and those not covered by the protected characteristics legislation." That means everybody has to be treated the same. This law is quite explicit and unambiguous, yet this council seems to be acting in breach of it by continuing to only consider those with the protected characteristics. And the example of that is when the EIAs, even the preliminary thing is done, you only look down the groups which fall into this protected categories. You don't look at other people. So you're still working on the old law. And as an example, performing a full equity impact assessment would clearly illustrate how non-car owners with an RPZ, compared with car owners, suffer both adverse financial impact and discrimination. Currently, the resident in MC parking zone with a permit will pay only £30 a year for that permit, whereas the non-car owner, me and several others, but still a minority, had no option but to pay £7.70 a week for a daily visitor during that 5 to 7 p.m. period. To remedy this, I suggest that every non-car owning council taxpayer should also be entitled to one permit to treat everyone equally and at the going rate, which would display the relevant council tax number in place of the car registration number. It would have to be a paper document, of course. Thus, a permit can be used for any single vehicle in its appropriate RPZ and for monitoring purposes be traceable to a qualifying household. Additional visitors or vehicles would be treated as the normal procedures. This would be fair to everybody under this equal law. Everyone must be treated as equals. It's not too late to get this right and look after us as well. In answer to your email, Councillor Stagg, you said you couldn't find any details of this relating to cars. It doesn't have to relate to anything specific. It is a general one-size-fits-all employment, everything, all laws. Everyone must be treated the same. It's not happening here, and I want it to change. And Mr. Lawther, would you answer my August the 22nd letter, please? I have sent you a reminder.
Thank you, Miss Jones. Mr. Lawther will answer, comment on your deputation later. Okay, thank you. I have missed out because I didn't have you down as definitely being here. Debbie Bailey, is that you? I apologise. You're on my list, but I thought you weren't here.
we've lived in our road for 13 years. We haven't really had much of a problem parking. I'd like to know what I'm going to get. I've got 3 cars in my family. That's myself, my partner, and my daughter, who is a student midwife, who has to have a car for her course because she has to do community placement. I'd like to know how she's going to afford to pay nearly £600. And I'd like to know what I'm going to get for my £720 that it's going to cost in our household. We weren't part of the parking permits before, but we were the next road along, and it caused absolute chaos because people didn't want to pay, so they parked in our road and then walked back to their house. We don't want to pay because I know people that did pay and they didn't get any better parking for it. I'd like to know what about the elderly who are going to have to now pay for permit things for their visitors. There's quite a few elderly people that live down our road. Maybe that's the only way they get visitors. It will put people off visiting them if they've got to pay. Why is it so expensive? If it's for our benefit, why is it so expensive? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. James Messiah.
Hello. Hello all. Before I start, I'd like to say a massive thank you to the councillors Susie Horton and Steve Pitt and all those who are working with them to reinstate the MB and MC parking zones. Personally, I would have loved to see the MB parking zone being brought back in its original format, and that format being extended across the whole of Southsea. But that's not going to happen. And anyway, I digress. For those who don't know me, my name is James, but everyone calls me Ted, okay? Yeah? I am here to speak in favour of reinstating the MB zone. However, I should make it clear, whilst I'm here to speak in favour of reinstating the MB zone, I am concerned about how the new format of the MB zone will work. Or, to put it another way, will the new format of the MB and MC zones work with the residents of the MB and MC zones? This 2-hour residents-only parking window, which has been proposed, I'm told this version of the parking scheme is easier to police. This may or may not be so, but the question that will be asked by those who will be paying for this particular parking scheme is, when I get home from wherever, will I be able to park near my house? That's the question. And I believe the answer to that question will be some of the time, which, in my opinion, is not good enough, especially when one has to pay for the privilege to park. The proposed 2-hour residents-only parking window will not help the MB and MC residents who, when driving home from work, reach their destination only to find the 2-hour window has ended and the driver of that vehicle is now trapped in an endless stream of traffic from outside the proposed zones, all looking to park in the MB and MC zone areas. And I may say, this is happening right now, especially on match days. I could give quite a few examples of this problem, but to save time, I will say this. Depending on the location of one's workplace, most people get home from work between 4 o'clock and 7:30. So, I would like to see the proposed 2-hour residents-only parking window for the MB and MC zones increased to cover the hours 4 o'clock to 7:30. Now, Those who designed the MB and MC parking zones may say the new format is only designed to cater for the commuter traffic coming from and going to the railway station, to which I say we, the residents of the MB and MC zones, are or will be parting with hard-earned cash to pay for the privilege of parking near one's home. If this new format fails, this simple test, if the new format fails this simple test, then what the hell are we paying for? Councillor Susie Horton has tried to reassure me by saying the format being proposed for the MP zone has been tried in the old MC zone and, to use her words, it worked quite well, which is another way of saying it worked some of the time. Well, would you buy a product from a salesperson whose sales pitch was, it's only £30 and it works some of the time? Councillors and committee members, if you do bring back the MB and MC parking zones, please bring them back in a form that works for the residents of the MB and MC zones. After all, we are the ones that are paying for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stagg. As residents of the area will be aware, Councillor Horton took the lead on this as something that she's campaigned on for a long time, and the statement I'm about to read are her words, but in both our names. This is an issue that has dominated the lives of residents of our ward for many years now. Whatever the views of the positives and negatives of RPZs, there has been a consistent move to introduce them across the city in response to requests from local residents. There are currently 33 zones in operation. The process for doing so has been an informal survey to ascertain demand, followed by a TRO. That is exactly what happened to the residents of MB in 2011, followed by the residents of MC in 2014. The story of what happened subsequently has been well rehearsed, but the key point is that no call from residents was ever made to delete the zones. Yet this was meted out to them under the guise of an experimental order announced in July 2014 and implemented in September 2014. They were permanently removed on the 26th of November 2015 based on a survey that 27 people responded to, with 25 of them wanting it reinstated. A month earlier, in October 2014, a petition was presented to full council with over 200 signatures on it calling for the zones to be reinstated. As the Central South Sea councillors, we pledged, and since then we have worked to support the residents to get another opportunity to have their say as to whether they want to have those zones reinstated. 4 years later, with a very transient population and the introduction of permit charges, we did not actually know what the views of residents would be. We have consistently based our approach, however, on three key factors. First, that RPZs are introduced in areas where residents in those zones want them, and zones should not be imposed upon them. Any consultation for a new proposed zone needs to be based on an informed decision with real knowledge of the impact of any neighbouring zones, and therefore needs to be done in a systematic and ordered manner. Second, the zone needs to deal with the specific parking issues relating to that area. In MB and MC, the cumulative additional cars form a combination of commuter parking, employee parking and high numbers of shared houses, or HMOs as they're officially known, added to multi-car owning families and business vehicles. This is why a one-size-fits-all super zone or a city or even Southsea-wide zone is not something we have entertained or supported. Parking issues in central Southsea, Old Portsmouth, Cosham and Copner are different at different times of the day, and we need different solutions. Thirdly, that the model of the zone be the most efficient for the zone itself and the surrounding areas, so that the zones work for residents but in the context of the whole city's need. For example, the model of zone used in MC has now been adopted in MB to maximise the use of the number of places and reduce former displacement issues. With regards to the report itself, we are happy that the consultation engaged with all members of the community, and we have had productive conversations with the university, students, the schools, doctors and traders. We've engaged with hundreds of residents through email. Councillor Horton has personally responded to over 700 on the doorsteps and on the phone, and have made ourselves available to answer questions and listen to comments. We acknowledge the challenges of the consultation in the usual situation of bringing back something that, with the new charges, etc., feel very different to the original. The change of zone in MB has caused a lot of confusion, and the introduction for that fee for the first permit was a barrier that wasn't the case when they were originally established. We respect the final results and that the majority of residents engaged with this consultation want the parking zones back. And just a final couple of comments. As ward councillors, we absolutely support the recommendation to not include Fernhurst and Chestnut into the new MB zone. We did, however, feel that it was vital that they were included in the consultation, because last time they were left out of the zone and we wanted them to have the opportunity to express their opinion. They have, and we are delighted to support them, and we'll go door to door talking to them next week. We've heard from Matt that zones discourage student vehicles. I can absolutely say that I agree with you, Matt. It's also true that a lot of students don't bring cars, but where they do, we need to discourage them if we can. That's not to say that students who need cars shouldn't, of course, have them. But talking to students on the doors over the last few weeks, during and since the consultation, we've had virtually no pushback from any of them, and they all understand the motivations. We've heard about non-car owning homes, something Ms Jones raised, and I personally support that approach and think it is something that should be given consideration. We also have to bear in mind, I'll finish now,
Can you finish?
the impact of the new flats on Goldsmith Avenue would have without a parking zone being introduced. What I can say to residents is the new MB zone may not be perfect, but we will continue to talk to you and make sure that you're happy with its implementation.
Thank you. Councillor Stubbs.
Where's the plan? It seems to me that over the last 4 years you've actually learned nothing at all, because we had an MB scheme which, when it was in before, had 400 empty spaces at an absolute minimum. In other words, the total number of permits was 400 less than the number of spaces, so there were empty places all of the time. So all of that scheme succeeded in doing, from the perspective of residents from outside the area, was moving the misery around. Now, I fully appreciate, if you live in the area, that's great, and you love it, and having empty streets is absolutely what you want, but we've got to look at this from the point of view of the city as a whole. There was recently a meeting of the East Southsea Neighbourhood Forum, which is in the ward I represent, and residents were asked there if they wanted a residents' parking zone. Now, all right, so it was the people at the forum, it's not necessarily representative, but still. It was 150 said no, and 2 said they did. Now, what you're going to give them is, and of course, what you're effectively going to be saying to them is, well, you might not want a zone, but what we're going to do is we're going to put in other zones without thinking. We're going to move the misery around, and we are going to move all of those cars outside your house, and we're going to call that democracy. And then you're going to want a scheme, and it's going to move through the city. So I ask you again, where is the plan? You need to have a strategy for this. You need to have a plan, and you don't have one. To me, your only real alternatives on this from here, where the city is now, if you don't want to move the misery around, is to either do a very large area, either south of St James's Hospital, maybe all of Portsea Island, or leave things as they are. But there's no incremental steps. You can't just do some little bits saying, well, we'll just do this little bit, and we'll pretend that all the cars won't get displaced somewhere else. I know this constant moving the misery around is something which you're not overly, you're quite prepared to do, but it doesn't make any sense. And on the plan, we've had this last couple of years, the Transport Scrutiny Panel has been working on a plan. You haven't even seen it. It hasn't been published, because here we are, it's decisions first, evidence afterwards. So if you want to know where the plan is, it's in the bin. That's where the plan is. So I ask you that you withdraw this today and go away and come up with something that works for the city as a whole, and not try to develop policy on a street-by-street basis.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. Now, is Mr Peter Aldridge here? Yes. Would you like to come? There are 2 people who were late, but I think we can fit them in. And Catherine Davis. No?
Yes, she's there.
Oh, right. I don't know if you've got enough room to... Maybe some of the people who have already done their deputations could go back to their seats. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Peter Aldridge. I'm a resident of Edmund Road in Southsea, and I've lived there for 30 years. I'm objecting to the parking scheme because it's already been aptly illustrated here this afternoon. You have a parking problem in Portsmouth, not just in those zones themselves. As it's a part, I did write in on one occasion, we're pushing this parking ball from one area to another. We are geographically an island, so it's either going to end up in the sea or it's going to go off the island. The costs that you've implemented on this occasion, and we're assured it's not done as a fundraising exercise. So permit 1 used to be free, it's now £30. Permit 2 is £100. Permit 3 is £539. I propose you do know that if you pay the parking fee each day of £1.10p, you'll only pay £401.50 for the entire year. So why is the third parking permit dearer than the actual parking itself? In Portsmouth, we have to pay for parking all over the city now. If you purchase a pint of beer in the pub, you can let anyone drink out of that pint. When you purchase a parking ticket in this town, you can't transfer it to another vehicle. You can't. Why can't we have a permit where you have one permit first, the second permit? The first one should be free anyway. As residents, we pay a lot of rates anyway. But the second permit, if you're going to charge for it, fine. But that permit permits you to park a car in that area. I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I? It gives you permission to park a vehicle in an area. So if I've got 2 permits in my house, if my daughter comes to drop her children off, which she does frequently, and my wife is away in her car shopping in Chichester, I should be able to put that permit, which I've paid for, to park in my road in her car. It shouldn't be for every single vehicle should have one individually. If you have a visitor, like the lady who hasn't got a car, she has friends come, she should be able to use her permit. If she's going to pay for it, £30, or if the first one's free, it should go in there. We should not be penalising the people of the city. It didn't work last time. It caused a lot of injustice in a lot of areas. I, for instance, have got a works vehicle. I had then to get my vehicle for work actually written so the logbook was at my house, so I could actually get a permit in the first instance. Because if it's not registered at your house, you can't park it there. We've got people who use cars and vans to go to work, to go off the island. Where are they supposed to go with their vehicles? Or have they got to pay every single day? I have a business which is going to be in the next zone, which is Hazelmere Road, which has been considered before, and will probably get considered again. I have 11 vehicles there. When I asked if when the parking, if it comes in, if we buy 4 parking, because their vehicles are not always there, when the vehicles come back to the office, can we put our parking permit in the vehicle to prove we paid for it? No, you must have one for every individual vehicle. We're told it's not a money raising exercise. It is. Last time, well, you nod your head and say it isn't, but £539. Believe you me, that is money that you want. You can't put. If you can give me an explanation of what the £530, how it's made up, that would probably be a little bit help at the end, please.
Yes, we'll give you an explanation. We have the parking manager here and our finance officer, and they will give you a breakdown. Okay.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Catherine. Thank you for letting me speak.
Could people be quiet at the back, please?
I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm on behalf of the ladies that work at the end of the road. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the shop, but we all work quite late. We finish at 11 at night. But my boss, we start at 5. So obviously, she drives home and she needs to be able to park for work, and we can't get off at our till to keep moving the cars. And you've got to think of the other staff. You have the young girls that work at our shop. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. So I'm here mainly on behalf of the people I work with, because we're a good team. Also, I have an elderly mother, and she's quite frail. And I'm in this situation where I don't actually own a car, but my son's, I've got my own son and my, sorry, I'm quite nervous. So I borrow the children's cars because my children are grown up, and I quite often use my son's car to take my mum out, especially on days like Victorious, where I don't like to completely be reliant on taxis, because when my mum's so elderly, I feel very protective, because obviously she's quite vulnerable. But I do rely on taxis heavily. But So, yeah, but so my son lives in North End and he's already got a permit on his car and on his wife's car. So, so if I have to borrow his car, then I have to get a scratchy to put on his car, which is already paid for, and we're on basic rate money, so I have to be watching my money because also I've got my own mortgage. Yeah, thank you very much. I hope that all makes sense. I'm quite nervous. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Councillor Bosher. Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, fine. I just thought you would have some other comments to make.
Perhaps I could ask a question that might help answer. I'm sorry. You think I should know this by now? You heard from a lot of the deputations that they are questioning the timings and disagreeing with the timings of it. And Councillor Pitt mentioned that we're not seeking to impose. But perhaps Ms Turton could answer this for me or interrupt me if I'm going wrong. But with the traffic regulation order, we are prescriptive in the definition of what we are trying to do. So where a traffic regulation order specifies certain times on it, if it's agreed, that's what will happen. Now, I think there was somebody there that suggested it ought to perhaps go till 7:30 or something in that sort of order. The decision that Councillor Stagg's got to make here today is either to agree to the traffic regulation order with the prescriptive times within it, or disagree with it. You can't amend it because that's what we've actually consulted on. So effectively, if the timings of these traffic regulation orders are wrong in that respect, then we have to go out to a new traffic regulation order to amend the times and go through the particular process of advertising it, consultation period, and come back here again. Yep or no?
Yes, that's quite right. If Councillor Stagg wished to extend the period from the current 2 hours to the proposed 3.5 hours, yes, we would have to go through a new consultation.
Can I just ask, when people signed the consultation, was that in the knowledge of the times that are...
Yes, in order to consult, you need to identify what restriction would be in place, so yes.
So people knew what they were signing for or against?
Yes.
Thank you.
Resident...
excuse me, Pam?
Yes, residents, people are able to make their representations in accordance with what the TRO has put forward as their proposal, in agreement or objection or just a general comment, but it is specifically about what the TRO is proposing to implement.
So when I say sign, I mean agreeing to or disagreeing with the proposal. So that was on the forms that you either had physically or did online, yes?
If I can then, so, because there are a lot of, we've had these great big thick packs where there's been a lot of representation that have come through. So effectively, those people that have written in and said, yes, we'd like the zone back, but we don't agree with the times, effectively, the bit where they say we don't disagree with the times would be ignored from a point of view of the consultation because we are consulting on a prescriptive traffic regulation order.
Yeah, you're absolutely right in that we have consulted on a 2-hour time period, and we've had a lot of responses to that. And we've, as you say, they're in the reports, there's a lot of them. And before making the recommendation, we did take note of what people have said. There's about 25 to 30 within each zone who have suggested different times. And at some point, we have to make a decision on which times, are appropriate. And actually, majority of people are happy with what we've proposed. There isn't a clear directorate, for example, where people say, oh, we want it to operate between 4 and 8 or 4 and 9. Some people have different ideas, but the majority have supported what we've proposed.
Councillor Bosher.
The traffic regulation order that went out ahead of the consultation. So residents would not have known until the traffic regulation order went out exactly what the traffic regulation order said, if that sounds a little bit yes ministerish. But the bottom line then is, if somebody came back and said, yes, I agree with the implementation of, let's say, MC zone, but I disagree with the timings that you're actually proposing, would you have included that as a yes, I support the zone? Because clearly there is a bit of an anathema there.
Again, it's more about what people have said. So where they've let us know what the problems are that they want us to deal with, and that they're listed in paragraphs 4.8 and 4.9. Obviously, we know from experience that this 2-hour period, roughly when people return home from work, has been effective in the past. And I'd say if a lot of people said they wanted one specific thing, then we'd be more likely to go out and reconsult on a new proposal. I think you've got enough support here for what we've proposed that we wouldn't need to reconsult.
Any more questions, Councillor Bersham?
I think I disagree with that, because effectively the traffic regulation order, and I don't want to bore people with bureaucracy, as I said, is a prescriptive thing that is actually eliciting a yes or no answer to it. But we've heard a variety of deputations here today, broadly supportive of the schemes, but some against them. But it's fair to say they haven't been black and white answers. There's been a lot of shades of grey in there about, is the timing right? What about this? What about that? And what about the other? And quite frankly, a prescriptive TRO does not address the concerns that have been raised here at all today. We've also heard deputations about the proposed MD zone, and I'll perhaps bring people back to what Councillor Stubbs actually said, in so much that all this is going to do is shunt the problem bit by bit by bit around the south of Portsea Island. And part of the problem is that at a previous decision meeting that Councillor Stagg dealt with, actually it was Councillor Dowling dealt with it because Councillor Stagg couldn't. It was a case of those people that might have been waiting for consultation on a zone in, let's say, North End or Copner, where they might have their own parking issues, are going to be shunted down a queue in favour of those around the south of the city that suddenly find that they've got an influx of second and third vehicles. Because the bottom line is, we've talked about the costings here, but the simplistic answer to the lady that perhaps says, I've got 3 cars in my house, I'm not going to pay the extra 500 quid for the third permit. I get that argument, but the less scrupulous won't do that. They'll park that third vehicle, or indeed that second vehicle, in somebody else's street that isn't actually part of the scheme. And that's what you get, which is why we've obviously had representation about MD. There's also representations about ME zones and a variety of other zones going forward. But the bottom line is, this is coming forward with prescriptive TROs that don't meet everybody's requirements and are just going to shunt the problem around Southsea and become a complete and utter mess where effectively you're going to set neighbour against neighbour. And I don't think that's the right approach at all.
Can I just say, residence parking zones have always been contentious. From the very first one, which was started in 1999 in Portsmouth, as you know. And can I just add a few things here? We did not want to be prescriptive and say that there should be parking zones all over the city. Personally, I don't have a problem with that from the point of view that we have far too many vehicles for the amount of parking space available, and also we have far too many vehicles for the roads, and so we have congestion and we have air pollution problems. But that my party said no, we will not be prescriptive. So we've always said from the word go that it's as residents ask for it, and so we go through a process why if enough residents ask their ward councillors for parking zone, we then go out, we survey. So that's to find out if there is enough support to actually go, because it costs. Every time you do it, it costs a lot of money. So you go through the survey, and if there's enough support there, you then go to the consultation. Now, as far as I'm aware, when people say they want, they're agreeing with it or disagreeing with it, that's with the knowledge of the timing that's there. They may have their own personal views about it, and I don't see, there is no reason why this cannot be revisited, is there? Because obviously, I mean, as I think it's already been said, every area has got different reasons. Some places have a problem in the evening, some of them have it in the day, if it's commuters, etc. So the timings are put in, and this was Ward Council suggestions coming from people they'd spoken in their wards. It's not just, oh, let's have a timing of 4 till 6 or 5 till 7. It was coming from residents. It's all based around what residents have asked for. Now, you can't get one size fits all. Not everybody is going to agree. The lady who's got 3 cars, I have real sympathy. However, if you haven't got off-street parking, there's only room for the majority of people to have 1 car outside their house. So, you know, I can remember when I was introducing 10 years ago, a parking zone, and a lady phoned me up and said that she objected to having to pay for her permit. This is when there was no charge. And I would say the charge was made because it was costing, I think we were £186,000 in debt, in the red as far as parking was concerned, which is why the charge was brought in by the previous administration. And there's no criticism of that, it's just a statement of fact, and I can understand why they did it. So she phoned me up and she said, "Do you object?" And I said, "Well, there's no problem because this the first permit is free." And she said, "Well, that's not good enough. Doesn't suit me." And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Because I've got more than 1 car." I said, "Well, it's only £50 as it was then for the second vehicle." She said, "That's not good enough for me either." And I said, "Well, how many cars have you got?" And she said, 5. And I said, "So 4 of your neighbours don't mind, do they?" And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you've only got enough room outside your house for 1 car, so you're having to put your 4 other vehicles outside other people's houses." And she said, "That's not my problem," and hung up. So, and I think that is, it's not everybody, but this was at the time, there were fewer cars around then than there are today. So it's not imposed, and it's, you know, it is listening to residents. If it doesn't work, all these residents' parking zones are revisited within a year to 18 months. And if it's not working, then another TRO can be put out to adjust it.
I'll try and come back on some of your points if I can, Councillor Stagg. 12 to 18 months, I think the programme actually runs to 2021, something in that sort of order anyway, so you could find yourself waiting a very long time. But I come back to the point that I made. It is a prescriptive time. It'll cost £7,500, which is not an insignificant amount of money, to actually introduce this if you agree to go down this road now. If you want to change the times, which you've just alluded to, we will listen and we will change the times. That means you go back out to another traffic regulation order, you go back to another 21 odd day consultation period, then we come back to another meeting like this, you change the times, and let's say it goes from 4 till 6 to 5 till 7, you then have to spend another £7,500 tweaking the signage and everything else like that. So where does that cycle end with the costs that are imposed? Because the bottom line of it is, if you keep racking up these capital costs going forward to actually tweak signage on the back of a TRO, you're going to end up having to put the price of permits up to actually cover that particular cost. So I come back to where I started from, bearing in mind, if you actually look at the figures for the MB return, and this is on the traffic regulation order, this isn't a political survey or anything else like that. This is a black and white council survey on the reintroduction of MB zone, and we've heard it from the officer. 14.5% of the total population in that zone actually replied, and out of that, only 8.6% were actually in favour of reintroducing the zone. Now, I haven't been through and actually looked at this, because some of that 8.6 may well have said, well, yes, I'd like the zone to be reintroduced, but I don't agree with the timings. Now, I wouldn't necessarily include those people in either yes or no, because quite clearly there is an issue there with the consultation process, because a traffic regulation order is a legal process that we have to go through. And I would have gone back to where we should have been a while back, which is, and I would say I am the chairman of the text panel that is reporting on parking, and we're still formulating the conclusions. We're still going through the legal process to sign off the report, which is due shortly. But these are actually jumping the gun in what we're actually looking at, in so much that you're seeking to impose something now, irrespective of the other areas south of Albert Road and pushing eastward along towards Eastney, and it's just going to create complete parking misery across the south of the island. I was at that East-South Sea Neighbourhood Forum that Councillor Stubbs referred to, and Councillor Vernon Jackson didn't know whether he was coming or going. He actually picked on me because I was sat in an audience of best part of 200 to answer his questions for him, and he clearly didn't understand the issues going forward. Your best course of action is to say no to these 2 TROs today because the response rate is so low, and wait and let's do something that's holistic, that includes Albert Road and some of the areas of Eastney, to try and get something that is actually going to fit the general population rather than pitch neighbour against neighbour going forward, because that's all you're going to do.
As far as I am aware, this is not jumping the gun. This is reinstating 2 parking zones that residents had voted for and were removed without consultation, which I think is undemocratic. Others may disagree 4 years ago. And this is at the request of residents who kept asking their ward councillors, could they have the zones back? Just a minute. So it's not jumping the gun at all. And we haven't got the staff, we haven't got the money to pay the staff to do it right across the city. I appreciate what you're saying. It does cause displacement, which is why we have got a programme. In spite of what you say, there is a strategy, and there are areas that have already asked for residence parking way back in the past, which are going to be surveyed and consulted. And there are areas which are already, some areas have already had their timings changed as a result of consulting with people. So it is ongoing. But Nikki here has made herself ill for doing these. I mean, she worked over and above what anybody, and don't blush, but she worked hours and hours and hours. Over weekends, she was sending emails out at 9:30 on a Saturday evening. And Tallulah has come in to help. But even so, you cannot do the whole city in one go. It'd be wonderful if we had enough staff to do it. It's not possible. So,
I don't think I've actually suggested doing it across the entire city, to be quite honest, Councillor Stagg. The bottom line...
There's got to be some stopping point. I mean, you know, if you only do half the city, it's going to have a knock-on effect to the wards next up.
You've got to look at it in the round, and all I'd say to you is if you actually look at the 2 zones that we've got before you, we've had 8.6% of the total area of MB in favour of it. You've had 8.7% in favour of it when it comes to MC. I appreciate you campaigned on it, but I guess the last word is that you campaigned on it in the area, and yet you lost to Labour Party.
This has got nothing to do with, as far as I'm concerned, party politics. It's trying to solve problems which are insolvable in reality for residents. It is a major problem in the city. Just too many vehicles. If somebody invented elastic roads, I would be delighted. So you could stretch them out at the end of the day, and you could fit all the cars in. However, that would cause a problem on the roads, obviously, with the extra traffic. But it's not possible. You've got to come up with something that fits what is available. And this, I mean, unless somebody else comes up with something better, I can't see anything else. Hang on, excuse me. One person is asking a question or making a point, and that's it. Yes. Have you finished?
I really do believe that most of us want some form of parking zone. We just can't agree on what sort of...
Yeah. I agree. Can we, not any more questions. People have had their chance to make a deputation, but there were some questions asked which a few people need to answer. Mr. Lawther, there was one I know about equality.
Equalities, yeah, from Barbara Jones. Yes, I mean, the Council does have an obligation. It's what it's called is public sector equality duty under the Equalities Act. And it's an obligation to ensure that people with what we call protected characteristics aren't discriminated against, or in actually doing something which is to their advantage. You don't discriminate against people who don't have protected characteristics. Fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, car ownership is not a protected characteristic. So whether you have a car or don't have a car, it's not something which the Council could legitimately take into consideration whenever it's drawing up. That was the point.
That's a legal
statement. And I'll ensure
statement.
that you get a reply to that letter. I'm very sorry that you didn't get it.
I think there were some other questions. Pam.
Yeah, there were quite a range of questions. We've tried to theme them around the recurring elements which came up. So if we start with MD, there was questions about when that area would be surveyed, assuming that a decision is taken to implement MB and MC today. And we can confirm that will be the informal survey will start on the week commencing the 5th of November, and so that will be completed prior to the implementation of MBMC if it is determined that those zones are proceeded with. There was also a question around Campbell Road, which Nikki, I think you'll be able to answer, please.
Yeah, just to clear up Campbell Road, which a few residents were a little bit concerned about, and they seemed to think that there would be parking bays on the north side and not the south side. Campbell Road actually falls within the MD King zone, but if the MC zone is introduced, residents on the north side of Campbell Road would be entitled to apply for permits for that zone, and that's an interim measure, so that then if the MD zone is introduced, then the whole of Campbell Road would be part of MD zone.
There were quite a few questions around the cost of the permits and what individuals essentially were getting for their money, but also how the 2-hour permit restricted time period would work. Wayne, do you mind if I let you answer the cost question?
Right, okay. So clearly from the pricing structure of the way permits are set out, it's designed to reduce the number of cars per household without kind of like impeding people's ability to have visitors. Hence why Mr. Aldridge's mathematical proposition he put to us is absolutely right. You know, if you buy a visitor's permit, it's cheaper than buying a third permit. Exactly. Right. So from an accountant's point of view, residence parking is a total nightmare. Whenever anyone approaches me and says, can you carry out a financial appraisal on this, it is really difficult. And the reason for that is income from residence parking comes from 3 different places. So you've got permits, you've got scratch cards, and you've got PCNs. So we've no information on the number of cars which are held in these areas.
PCNs are fines.
Sorry, fines. You've got no information about how many cars per household are held. With the visitor permits, I've got no idea how many visitors people are going to have or what the frequency of those will be. And then thirdly, with the parking fines, I've got no idea how many contraventions there'll be. So it makes it really difficult in order to be able to actually come over.
Can you just, please don't call out, just allow Wayne to carry on.
So when you look at the 33 zones that we've currently got in place, some of them make money, some of them don't. And it literally isn't, I think the split's about 18-15. And overall, it kind of about washes its face each year. But it depends on what kind of enforcement they actually require. The other thing to say is about permit sales. So in the finance comments, I talk about, if I take the census data, it's about 1.37 cars per household. And what that tells you is that the first permit is always going to be, it's going to be the biggest selling permit. And at the moment, the split is around about 85% of first permits is where the income comes from, about 14% for a second permit, and a very small amount for the third permit. And there could be reasons around that. But from our point of view, in terms of this being a money-making scheme, the pricing structure isn't set out to do anything that will create a surplus. And the third, the most important thing is that any income that comes from visitors parking is on-street parking income. And on-street parking income can, and it's set out in the traffic regulation order, says that any income or surplus that comes from that has to go back into the parking reserve. It doesn't go back into the general fund. So, for example, you couldn't use it to pay for museums or social care or anything like that. It has to go back. And the Act sets out how that money's spent. So looking at these schemes in their sort of in isolation, well, I can do some numbers and I could say, yeah, it could make a profit. It might do, but I don't know because I don't have enough information.
Can I ask, are the permits all the same cost in all the areas?
Yes, yeah, right across the city.
Pam, have you got any more?
Yeah, there was a general comment about how the 2-hour restrictions work and what impact that has. So if I could ask Nikki to just talk through that.
I think it was specifically mentioned the impact on maybe older people during the day that might need more visitors. And I think that's one of the advantages of having a 2-hour time slot during the day for permit holders only, in that whilst it prevents the long-term parking, which residents have identified various causes of that, in that if you're at home during the day, whether you have more visitors or not, you don't need to use a visitor permit because the restriction only applies for 2 hours a day. So all through the day, if you have any visitors or carers or anyone like that, you won't need to purchase visitor permits. Similarly, if you have someone to work on your house, to do repairs on it, or if you're a business and you have your customers, then the 5 to 7 or the 4 to 6 is less likely to have an impact on you.
Anything else? Okay. Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair. Parking issue is national issue, not only Portsmouth. Everywhere is this problem. I hear the deputation, someone get finance problem, someone got timing problem, someone family, they have cars, someone business problem. So it's a various problem. And we have to see which is help the residents and community, because residents, we have to give them more priority. Yes, we understand if we imply the MC June, then it will be affect other route. That is right. But there is no solution for the parking. Whatever we do, we can't make the solution unless we make parking space somewhere else. I always, every single meeting I said, if we got any space for the parking from the council and we can make 5-story building parking space, that means there is solution. Otherwise, there is no solution for the parking. And there is, if someone saying that yes, 4 o'clock to 7:30, 4 p.m. to 7:30, it is right. But it is majority of the people coming from the work and family, they got a time between this time to 5 to 7 p.m., 2 hours, and rest of the day is free. So we have to do something, and we have to make sure that we're working for the community and for the residents, and we can see how it goes. So I completely agree with the recommendation what on the officer done today. That's all.
I'd just like to add a few points. Somebody said about the old system whereby you could park for up to 4 hours at any time during the day. Impossible to monitor. It's pointless having a residence parking zone if you can't actually keep an eye on the number of people who shouldn't be in the zone being there. The idea is to keep it free during that period of time. If you're allowed to park for up to 3 or 4 hours in a day, that's any time during the day. We can't have civil enforcement officers hanging around in roads all day, whereas if you have a 2-hour slot, or in some places a 3-hour slot, they can stay in that area and therefore monitor it much better. Any other comments from...
Can I just ask
Oh, yes, sorry, yeah.
I mean, if I can, quite a few of the deputations made reference to student vehicles actually being parked in the area. If I was a student and I lived in one of the zones and I actually re-registered my car at the address I was staying in, what's to stop me getting a permit anyway?
Well, there's nothing to stop you because we don't...
Please not shout out.
We don't discriminate against students, but what the criteria is, yes, you have to have a vehicle registered and address. And from the experience of other zones, very few students are actually prepared to do that because they're only here temporarily. And obviously there's a limit on the number of permits per household, and a lot of the houses in multiple application are student accommodation, so that limits the amount of students, if they're prepared to register their cars, that could obtain permits.
I mean, I guess the point that I'm sort of making is the fact that please don't be under the misapprehension that the introduction of a zone will chase away student cars, because there is potentially a way around it for a significant number of students. If they did wish to bring their cars to the city, they could go through the DVLA and re-register at that address. So although the problem of student cars might subtly reduce, it wouldn't go away completely.
Can I just say that currently, I mean, I think it's Councillor Horton, who works at the university, has been working with the university, and they are actually responding very positively in discouraging students from bringing their cars here. And there have been a lot fewer this term than there have been in the past. So I think the message is getting across. Because if you're a student in the city, I mean, you're so close to everything, there is no need to bring your car here. I'm not going to take any more questions. If you have any questions, you can write them in, because I don't think these... Pardon? The dates on... Hang... Yes. Nikki, can you answer that one?
The consultation was 21 days, and it ran from the 30th of August to the 20th of September, and they're the consultation dates.
Yeah, it's got August, the date sent.
Yeah.
The date September was a Sunday, when that was the last of the consultation. So how come they've already made up their mind in August when it doesn't end until September?
No, the actual consultation ran for 21 days.
So
No decisions have been made.
The letter was sent was August.
Yeah. That was ahead of the 21...
The end of the consultation was September.
Yeah.
So how come they've already made up their mind?
I think you misunderstand the actual letter.
That's the date to reply by. So there's 21 days to reply.
By September?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a Sunday.
Mhm.
So do they consultate on Sunday? So in other words, everything's thrown away.
The traffic regulation order has to allow 21 days for consultation. So whatever date that ends in, that will be 21 days.
Already says they've already decided what they're going to do.
No, that's the...
Perhaps it's the wording of the question that they use. Do you want these zones?
It says, please send any comments you... Okay.
So, sir, if I can help, what that basically comes back to what I was saying about a TRO.
Simon, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Thank you. Do you understand now what the procedure was? No. Can you re-explain it?
In order to consult on a residence parking zone through the statutory process, we need to say what it would be that we would implement. It's just the way the legislation is, that we need to say we are going to do this, a specific and positive proposal.
2 weeks before.
Well, yes, you give advance notice of what you're going to do, and then you have 21 days in which to respond to that.
Stuck through my door with a call
That's nothing to do with there's nothing to do with the actual traffic regulation order or the consultation. Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to take that up then with Councillor Horton? Because it's nothing to do with this meeting. Okay? Well, good. I'm pleased about that. Can I just say I failed to say, and I apologise for this, that we did have 3 written comments. No individual names because of data protection. 2 of them were in favour of introducing the parking permits, and the 3rd one had a number of concerns which are listed, and all of these have been mentioned today through other people. Okay, so I think I'm ready to, and based solely. Which road was that? Which road? I'm sorry, Nikki, can you explain this? I think it was because if it would have been left out, you would suffer from displacement, yes?
Last time the MC zone was in place, the boundary was drawn up Francis Avenue, and unfortunately that caused all of the several hundred cars to migrate into Bath Road and Henley Road. And that's...
Can you please be quiet at the back?
We have all the responses from residents who are very upset about it. So this time around we've drawn the boundary at Bath Road, and again it's all been consulted on, and if people really didn't want it, they just had to say, as we heard with Fernhurst and Chestnut Road, they've been excluded because we had 100% objections. The same opportunity was given for Bath Road, Henley Road, and the recommendation is that they're included.
Yeah, I'm going to finish now because I think a lot of people have had they say, which doesn't normally happen. Normally you just have the deputations and that's it. So I've allowed you to ask questions and Nikki.
The letter was to make people aware of the consultation, but we had, I think, over 400 yellow notices on the streets as well. And
Was that as a business? It should have been a proper letter.
it was a letter. It was the same letter sent to all properties.
Yeah, we didn't receive one from our shop.
Okay, really.
Our manager didn't even nothing about it, so we told him.
Yeah, it's
well,
a
that's
shame
something we
didn't know
need
that
to look
before.
into. Something we'll look into it. Right, based on purely on numbers, well, it is. I mean, and if anybody is querying Nikki's honesty, I would bring that. Well, people are saying that it's a fiddle, etc. It's not a fiddle. I'm going on the numbers that have come in, and in both cases there have been more people in favour of reinstating. Excuse me, I am still speaking. If it had been the other way around, if there were more people against it, and I've done this in the past, and I've turned down a TRO and the recommendations in the past, if there had been more people against it than were in favour, and it's purely on numbers, and it's democratic. It's exactly the same thing. Well, everybody had a chance to fill in and say whether they wanted a zone or not, and those who did were more in favour than were against. So on that basis, I accept both recommendations. Thank you.